It lasted less than 2 seconds. Jimin turned, his eyes landed on Suga, and something moved across his face that is genuinely difficult to categorize. Not surprise exactly, not the stage reaction that gets performed for an audience, something quieter and more specific than either of those things. The camera caught it, and the clip of that 2-second moment has now been looped more times than almost anything else from the entire Brussels run. Not because something dramatic happened, not because words were exchanged or a big gesture was made, because Jimin looked at Suga the way you look at someone when you notice something about them that the rest of the room hasn't registered yet. And once you've seen it, you'll spend the rest of this video understanding exactly what he saw. This channel is for the army who watches the same clip multiple times, not because they missed something the first time, but because they know there's always another layer. The kind of detail that only becomes visible once you understand the context around it. The last few minutes of this video are going to give you that context, and it's going to reframe what looked like a small moment into something that says quite a lot about 13 years of two people knowing each other. July 1st, 2026, Brussels, Belgium. King Baudouin Stadium, 50,000 people. The first night of what would become BTS's first ever concerts on Belgian soil, a historic debut in a country that had been waiting for this for years. The Arirang World Tour had already moved through Goyang, Las Vegas, Tampa, New York, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, Tokyo, Seoul, and Madrid by this point. Each city had produced its own viral moments, its own fan cam compilations, its own set of images that circulated after the shows ended. Brussels was supposed to be another city on the list. It became something different. Not because of the surprise songs, though those mattered. Not because of the production, though the 360-degree stage was as immersive as it had been everywhere else. Because of what Jimin's face did when he turned and saw Suga. Here is the setup, as specifically as possible. The Arirang Tour's production is, by design, one of the most carefully controlled concert experiences in contemporary live music. The 360-degree stage means there are no bad angles, and no hidden ones. Every member is visible from every section of the stadium at virtually all times. This is, from a fan documentation perspective, both extraordinary and relentless. Fan cams from Brussels covered Suga's positioning from at least a dozen different angles before the first song had ended, which is how within hours of the show, a pattern of comparison began to circulate. Side-by-side images, Suga in Goyang versus Suga in Madrid versus Suga in Brussels. The difference was visible, not dramatic, not the kind of change that announces itself, more the kind of shift that you sense before you can name it. Something about the overall presentation that read as intentional in a new way, a visual choice that carried a specific energy that the previous cities hadn't. The fan accounts that first posted the comparisons were careful in how they framed it, no overclaiming, just the images, side by side, with a simple question: does anyone else notice this? Within an hour, the answer was approximately 3 million people. This is the point where the Jimin clip enters the story, because the fan cam footage of Suga in Brussels, once people started looking for it, surfaced a secondary detail that the initial comparisons had missed. There is a moment early in the set where Jimin moves across the stage towards Suga's side of the 360-degree platform. It is, in the context of the show, a normal piece of choreography. Members move across the stage constantly. The spatial geometry of the performance requires it. But the camera that was tracking Jimin caught something at the end of that cross. As Jimin reaches his position and turns to face the crowd, his sightline passes directly through where Suga is standing, and he pauses. Not a full stop, not something that registers as a break in the performance, just a beat. A fraction of a second longer than the geometry of the moment requires. His eyes land on Suga, and his face does something. Describing the expression is difficult because it exists in a register that doesn't map cleanly onto standard emotional categories. It's not the fan service smile. It's not the stage persona that Jimin deploys when he wants to give the crowd something to respond to. It's the deadpan reaction that members sometimes perform for each other as a deliberate bit, The closest description that circulated in the threads, and multiple accounts independently arrived at similar language, was something like recognition with an overlay of something warmer. The specific quality of noticing a change in someone you know well enough to notice changes in. Not seeing the new thing and thinking, that's different. Seeing the new thing and thinking, that's very specifically you. That distinction is subtle, but once you've experienced it from the inside, once you've had the moment of looking at someone you've known for years and seeing them make a choice that is entirely consistent with who you know them to be, the expression Jimin wore makes complete sense. He wasn't surprised, he was recognizing something. ARMY went to the archives immediately. This is what ARMY does, and in this case, the archives were particularly relevant, because what circulated along with the clip was a compilation. Every documented moment across 13 years of Jimin noticing and responding to Suga's appearance. The specific way his attention sharpens when Suga makes a visual choice that reads as particularly personal. The consistency of the response, not loud, not performed, not the exaggerated double take that gets done for cameras, but a small, quiet adjustment of attention that happens whether or not anyone is watching. The compilation covered a significant range, from early variety show footage where a younger Jimin reacted to something about Suga's look with a directness that the other members didn't match, to award show moments where Jimin's sightline, in footage that wasn't focused on either of them, tracked something about Suga across a crowded room, to tour footage from previous years where a similar quiet registration happened in the background of shots that were officially focused elsewhere. The pattern, once you see it assembled chronologically, is striking. Not because it means anything dramatic, but because it is so consistent over such a long period that it stops reading as a coincidence and starts reading as something more like a habit of attention. Jimin pays attention to Suga in a specific way. He has for a long time, and the Brussels clip is the clearest capture of that specific attention that the tour has produced so far.
The surprise songs for Brussels Night 1 were Tomorrow and Boy With Love. Both of those choices are significant in their own right, and both generated considerable content on their own. Tomorrow particularly for the reasons that anyone who knows Suga's history with that song would understand. Written in a period of personal difficulty, performed now in a stadium in a country they'd never played before, on a tour that had just broken a 7-year world record. The weight of that combination is not subtle. But what connects the surprise song moment to the Jimin reaction clip is a detail that almost nobody mentioned in the initial coverage. When Tomorrow came on, when the first notes played and the members began processing what song had been selected, the camera that had been tracking Jimin caught something. He turned, again, toward the same direction, toward Suga. Not toward the soundboard, not toward the stage manager, not toward the crowd, toward Suga, and held there for a moment before the performance of the song took over, and both of them became, as they always do in those moments, exactly the professionals they've trained to be. 2 reactions, 2 turns, the same direction, the same specific attention. Within hours of the Brussels footage starting to circulate, fans who were analyzing the timeline noticed that Jimin's turns toward Suga happened at the 2 most emotionally weighted moments of the night. The first notable visual moment, and the first emotionally loaded surprise song. The instinct, in both cases, was the same. Check Suga. There is an interview from 2020 from the Map of the Seoul era, which was itself a period of considerable emotional weight for BTS, where Jimin was asked about how he navigated the specific kind of pressure that comes with performing at the scale BTS had reached by that point. His answer was characteristically considered. He talked about the members, about the way the presence of 7 people who understood the experience from the inside made the experience navigable in a way it wouldn't otherwise be. And then he said something specific that has lived in ARMY's memory for years. Some members I watch when I want to know if something is right, like a reference point. He didn't name anyone. He didn't have to. The Brussels footage, 2 turns, 2 moments of checking, 2 instances of Jimin's attention orienting toward the same person at the moments when the emotional temperature of the night shifted, is a live document of that 2020 answer. Not an interpretation of it, not a reading of it through any particular lens, an illustration of it. here is the part that most of the initial coverage didn't reach. Because the analysis of Jimin's reaction was so thorough, the frame-by-frame breakdowns, the comparison compilations, the threading of his expression through every available angle of fan cam footage, that most accounts stopped there. The reaction was the story. The clip was the content. What got less attention was what happened after. During the Ment segment, the part of BTS concerts where members address the audience directly, in a more informal register than the performance sections, Jimin said something to the Brussels crowd that landed differently in context. He talked about the city, about what it meant to be somewhere for the first time, about the specific quality of a first night in a place that had never held them before. And then he said, in the way he sometimes says things that are directed at the audience but aimed slightly different, "I always feel it most when I look at the members. Whatever city we're in, whatever's happening, I look at them and I know where I am." He didn't gesture toward anyone. He didn't have to. 50,000 people in Brussels heard a general statement about the group, and somewhere in the fan cam footage, from an angle that caught Suga in the background of Jimin's sightline during those words, there is a small, almost imperceptible shift in Suga's posture. Not dramatic, not the kind of movement that would register if you weren't looking for it. Just a very slight adjustment. The kind of quiet acknowledgement that happens between two people when something is said in public that is also simultaneously said to a specific person. There is something about the Brussels clip, the original 2-second reaction, the one that circulated first and has been looped the most, that resists easy summary. Jimin looked at Suga. His face did something specific, and then the performance continued as it always does, because that is the job, and they are both, always, extraordinarily good at it. But the look exists, on camera, from multiple angles, in a moment that was not designed to be documented, and that was only captured because the 360-degree stage made invisibility impossible. And what it reveals, when you place it next to the 13 years of similar moments that came before it, when you read it through the 2020 interview about reference points, when you understand that the visual change Jimin was reacting to was a specific kind of choice rather than a random variation, is something that doesn't need to be inflated to be significant. Two people, a long time of knowing each other, the specific quality of attention that develops between people who have been in enough difficult rooms with someone that they've learned to check their face when they need to know if something is okay. Jimin said it in 2020. The Brussels footage showed it in 2026. 6 years apart, hundreds of cities, thousands of hours of shared stages and shared pressure and shared everything that comes with being BTS.
And still, in a country they'd never played before, in front of 50,000 people who had been waiting years for this, the instinct was the same. Look at Suga. See if he's okay. See what his face says about where we are. If you've been watching them long enough to have your own version of this moment, the one that made you understand something about how they moved through rooms together, the space below this video is for exactly that. The most precise observations about these two have never come from press. They've always come from people who are watching closely enough to see the small things.